What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Sports Grown Podcast. Today, we're going to be looking at the bracketology that was released by Joe Lunardi on February 27th. So, we're going to go through the overall bracket watch, and then after that, we're going to dive into our bracket predictions on this day's bracketology. We'll be doing this every Thursday from here all the way until Selection Sunday. So, let's waste no time. Let's get into the latest bracketology by Joe Lunardi. So, your bracket watch, your top overall seed is out of the Big Ten, the Purdue Boilermakers. The first team out is Texas A&M, and the last team in is Gonzaga. Now let's shift our gears onto the bubble. The last four byes are Texas, Wake Forest, Nevada, and New Mexico. The last four in are Seton Hall, Virginia, Providence, and Gonzaga. Your first four out is Texas A&M, Villanova, Utah, and Colorado. And then the next four out, Butler, Ole Miss, Kansas State, and Iowa. So the play-in would look like the 16 seeds would be Merrimack and Norfolk State facing off against each other as the automatic qualifier. Seton Hall and Virginia would be the 11. As you see there, Virginia has moved down all the way to the 11 seed. Number 16 seeds would be Little Rock, Arkansas Little Rock, that is Grambling State, which would be automatic qualifiers facing off in the second of two 16 seeds. And then rounding out the play-in would be Providence and Gonzaga at the 11th seed. Now let's dive into the region by region to see what teams are moving up and moving down in the bracket. First, in the Midwest, you have Boise State moving up to an 8 seed, Florida Atlantic moving down to a 9 seed, Washington State, after really good stretch that Washington State has been on. They are coming off of a loss, but we'll see if they bounce back to a 5 seed. Dayton for 6 seed. Virginia, like I mentioned earlier, is down to an 11 seed. Texas Tech is down to a 7 seed, and Sam Houston State is moving up in the field at 15. Moving on down to the West, Little Rock is a new team at their automatic qualifier. TCU is moving up to an 8 seed. Michigan State out of the Big Ten is moving down to a 9. Kentucky, after their big win over Mississippi State, is up to a 5. And then Cornell out of the Ivy League, they're new to the field at 14. Utah State out of the Mountain West is moving up to a 7. Texas is moving down to a 10. Let's move on now to the South, where South Dakota State is moving up to a 16 seed. Mississippi State moving up to an 8. Nebraska also moving up to a 9. Florida moving up to a 6 seed. Wake Forest and Fairfield are the new teams in the field in the South region. Moving on now, let's go now to the East region, where we have Northwestern moving up to a 9 seed. BYU falling to a 7 seed. I'm curious to see after their win in Allen Fieldhouse against Kansas, they're going to move up maybe to a 6 or a 5. We'll see in the latest bracketology that's released. And then New Mexico is moving down to a 10. So those are really the shifters that we see in this February 27th bracketology by Lunardi. Now let's go ahead and shift our attention to making our picks of who's going to be making a deep run here in March Madness. So let's move on now to the bracket here. Using PDF filler out there, using this website to fill out this bracket if y'all want to use this, or there's other tools on the internet that you can use as well. So let's go ahead and fill out this bracket here. So our first matchup that we have in this first region is the number 1 overall seed Purdue going up against the winner of Merrimack and Norfolk State. I don't see a seed upset here. Purdue's been one of those teams in the past that has fallen in the first round, but I think that this team is too talented to fall this early. So we are going to go with Purdue pulling off this victory over the 16 seed to start off this bracket. Next, we have one of those vaunted 8 and 9 matchups, 8 seed Boise State out of the Mountain West, number 9 seed FAU. I think that this would definitely be a very good matchup. FAU has definitely been inconsistent down the stretch. They had some good wins and they also had some bad losses. So I think that this would be a really good matchup, but I am leaning towards the FAU Owls here. I think that their experience in March, too. Boise State was a team that we saw in last year's bracket. They faced off against Memphis. So both of these teams are definitely well suited for this 8-9 matchup. Now we have a 5 and a 12. These 5 over 12s are always tricky here, but I am going to move Washington State. I definitely been liking the way that this team has been playing, so we're going to be moving the 5 seed Washington State on. 4 seed Baylor, 13 seed Vermont. Vermont's always one of those teams that are scary, but we are going to be moving Baylor to the second round. Now we get our first 6-11 matchup. Dayton facing off against the winner of Seton Hall and Virginia. Actually, I'm going to go with Seton Hall winning that matchup. I know that they did not look great last night. I believe that they played Marquette. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I like the upset here with Seton Hall. I definitely like what Seton Hall has done so far this season. I know coming off of not so great of a performance last night, but I think that Seton Hall can pull off the upset. Dayton is one of those teams that are trending in the wrong direction, so I'm going to go with an 11-6 upset. The number 3 seed Alabama and High Point. I think that this is pretty easy. I'm going to go with Alabama moving on, and then we see a 7-10 with Texas Tech and Nevada. Texas Tech has been one of those teams that I haven't really been too high on either. I think that Nevada they have a lot of experience on their team, so I'm going to go with a Mountain West school here with Nevada moving on, so the 10 seed here. So we have an 11 and a 10, so a couple of upsets early on. And then we have the 2 and the 15 with Marquette and Sam Houston. I am going to go with Marquette. Marquette, I mean, they're definitely one of my favorite teams to make it deep in this tournament, so we'll see just how far we have them going. All right, we'll keep it in this region. We'll fill out the rest of this, go on to the Elite Eight and all that. So let's go to the second round matchup. Number 1 seed Purdue, number 9 seed FAU. Now, this would definitely be a scary matchup for FAU, but if any of their guards get in foul trouble, I mean, Zach Edey is definitely a menace down the paint. But I am going to go with Purdue. I think that this is definitely their moment to make a deep run. They definitely have a talented team, so I'm going to go with the Purdue Boilermakers moving on. Then we have a 5-4 Washington State and Baylor. I'm going to keep with chalk here. I am going to go with Baylor moving on. And then we have an 11-3 with Seton Hall and number 3 Alabama. I'm going to have Seton Hall's little bit of a Cinderella story ending here. I think that Alabama, if they get hot from the three-pointer, I mean, they just put up 100 once again against Ole Miss last night. That loss probably ships Ole Miss out entirely of the bracket, so we probably won't be seeing the Rebels in March. But we'll see. We've seen crazier things happen when the calendar is flipped to March. Then we have a 10-2 of Nevada and Marquette. I'm also going to go with Marquette here. So we pretty much have all 4 seeds advancing to this one, to the Sweet 16. So we had 1 seed Purdue, 4 seed Baylor. This would definitely be a tricky matchup, but I am going to continue the run for Purdue. I definitely like this team. I think that Edey, you can double team all you want, but he's definitely a talented player, so I'm going to be moving Purdue very far. I've done it in the past, moving Purdue very far, even to the Final Four, so we'll see if that happens once again. And then 3 seed Bama and number 2 seed Marquette. I think that this would definitely be a high-score matchup. They got elite guard play from both teams, but I'm going to be going with Marquette. I know it's a little chalky, but I definitely like Marquette and Purdue coming out of this one. So Purdue and Marquette, I'm actually going to stop Purdue's run here. I'm going to go with Marquette, the Golden Eagles, to go on to the Final Four. So our first Final Four team set with number 2 seed Marquette. I don't really like picking all 1 seeds, so I think that Purdue, you're looking at one of those teams, definitely talented, but they're definitely very vulnerable in this March Madness bracket. Let's go on now and shift over to the top right portion of the bracket with the defending national chances, where you see number 1 UConn going up against number 16 Eastern Kentucky. I don't think that this would even be close. I mean, UConn, man, they are definitely on it. They did lose, which has been quite some time since they've lost. They lost to Creighton over there in Omaha, but I think that UConn gets out of this really easily. I think that UConn is definitely a team that is built to win back-to-back national championships. So we'll see if it happens. 8-9 once again, Oklahoma Northwestern. Oklahoma has been one of those teams that's hot, but Northwestern, if you really look at their resume, they have some quality wins. So I am going to go with another 9/8 with Northwestern. Now we have Wisconsin, another Big Ten team against McNeese State. McNeese State is one of my favorite teams, mid-major teams to watch that could really pull off an upset and make a deep run to the Sweet 16 even. So I am going to go with Will Wade's squad and go with McNeese State out of the Southland Conference. We'll see if McNeese State ultimately does win the Southland Conference. The Southland Conference tournament is held at McNeese State, so they definitely get advantage there. So I'm going to go with McNeese State, a 12/5. You at least have to have one because it always happens. It didn't happen last year. We'll see if it happens in 2024. Auburn and App State. App State, definitely one of those teams to watch. I think it's either going to be App State or James Madison. I think that would definitely be one of the popular upsets in March. But I am going to go with Auburn. They are coming off of that tough loss against Tennessee last night. But this is one of those teams that could definitely play well. They have the guard play and they have the size down low to beat you. And then we have a 6-11. These are the two hottest teams in college basketball. St. Mary's has a tough test coming up this weekend against Gonzaga. South Florida has really been putting it on in the American Athletic Conference, so we'll see if they run away with that. The American could potentially get two teams in there with FAU as well. But I'm going to go with St. Mary's. St. Mary's, I mean, they're undefeated in the West Coast Conference. It's hard to pick either one of these teams, like I mentioned. A lot of momentum behind the Gales and the Bulls, but I am going to go with St. Mary's. I feel like every time that I pick against them, they go on a run. So maybe this is the year that I pick them to go far. Iowa State and Oakland is our 3-4 team matchup in the region. Iowa State's definitely one of my favorite teams. They only needed over 50 points last night in their victory. So Iowa State, they can beat you in many ways. Another Big 12 team that we see, the 7 and the 10, BYU, New Mexico. These are two of my favorite teams to watch this season. But I am going to go with BYU. I think that BYU, if you look at their resume as well, like in a loaded Big 12, I believe that they're tied for first in the Big 12. So definitely, you got Houston, and then really in a tier below that, it's maybe BYU, Kansas, and then you have Baylor as well. So I'm going to go with BYU there, and I'm also going to go with North Carolina over Colgate. Now, Colgate's one of those teams that you always see in the bracket pop up, and they always play you well. But I just don't really like this matchup for Colgate against North Carolina. Let's move on now to the second round matchups where we see number 1 seed UConn face off against number 9 seed Northwestern. I am going to go with the Huskies moving on here. I think that Northwestern's run in right here. Now, this would be a really good matchup here with the 12 seed McNeese State Cowboys going up against number 4 Auburn. Do I have McNeese State pulling off a little fun? You know what? Just for the video purposes, let's have some fun. Let's go with McNeese going to the Sweet 16. So we're going to have a 12 seed, the McNeese State Cowboys, moving on to the Sweet 16. Like I mentioned, definitely one of my favorite mid-majors that could definitely make some noise in March. 6 and the 3, we have St. Mary's and Iowa State. I am going to keep the Cyclones run. Moving on here, I am going to go with Iowa State. I definitely think that the Big 12, it's a really loaded conference. So I think would not be shocked if you see a majority of those teams out of the Big 12 make a run as well. Number 7, BYU. Number 2, UNC. I definitely think that UNC would be on upset alert here. But I think that UNC with their guard play gets over the hump. And then number 1 seed UConn, number 12 seed McNeese. As much as I would love to see McNeese pull off a run, I think that their run-ins here into a UConn team that's really deep. They definitely have some depth. So I am going to go with Dan Hurley and the boys moving on to the Elite Eight, where they will face off the winner of number 3 seed Iowa State and number 2 seed UNC. You know what? I am going to go with Iowa State in this one. You got to create a little bit of parity in this one. You can't have all 1s and 2s advancing from every bracket. And then you have number 1 seed UConn, number 3 seed Iowa State. I am going to go with UConn moving on here. So far, I have 2 Big East teams. We'll see if that conference can really pull it off. But we have so far a 2 seed with Marquette and 1 seed in UConn. Let's move on now down to the left-hand portion of the bracket where we have number 1 seed Arizona facing off against the winner of Little Rock and Grambling. I don't see any 16 seeds. I would definitely love to see it, but I am going to go with Arizona, their final time to make a run representing the Pac-12. And then we have a very interesting matchup here with TCU, Michigan State. Definitely love the way that these teams have been playing, but I am going to go with the Horned Frogs of TCU pulling off this victory over Tom Izzo. It's hard to pick against Tom Izzo in March, but I'm going to do it. And then we have 5 seed Kentucky, a 12 seed Richmond. We could potentially see 2 A-10 teams with Dayton and Richmond. But I'm going to go with the Kentucky Wildcats moving on here. Definitely a huge win on the road at Starkville. Reed Shepherd hit that game-winning shot. I think that Kentucky is one of those teams that you don't want to see make a deep run. They're definitely starting to figure it out, at least on the offensive side. Putting up 117 against Alabama, over 90 points against Mississippi State, a team that's really built on their defense. So I think that they're really turning the page there in the SEC. San Diego State is a team that we saw play for the national championship. They're the 4th seed facing off against 13 seed UC Irvine. UC Irvine is definitely one of those scary 13 seeds here, but I think that SDSU moves on to the second round. And then we have 6th seed South Carolina facing off against Providence and Gonzaga. Providence, not a great performance last night against Creighton. Gonzaga, we usually see them as a top 4 seed, but I like them here to move on here. I think that they beat Providence, and then they pull off the upset against South Carolina. South Carolina was one of those teams that had a hot stretch, but not looking like the same team that they did at the start of the season. So I like the momentum that Gonzaga has there. We'll see if they can pull off that big victory this weekend against St. Mary's on the road. Number 3, Duke and Cornell. I am going to go with the Duke Blue Devils, but there's that Ivy League, man. Whether it's Princeton or Cornell, I definitely think that they could definitely scare at least somebody in the first round. 7 seed Utah State, 10 seed Texas. Texas is coming off of that huge victory over Texas Tech on the road, but I'm going to go with Utah State. Texas, for me, has just been too inconsistent for my liking, so I'm going to go with Utah State. I picked Texas to go deep, actually win the national championship last year, but I just don't think it's the same team that we saw last year, so I am going to go with Utah State. I think that their experience definitely helps them here. Number 2 seed Kansas and Eastern Washington. I'm going to go with the Jayhawks. Kansas is definitely a loaded team that can make a deep run here. So I think that Bill Self squad moves on to the second round. Now we have Arizona and number 8 TCU. We have seen this matchup before. It's been pretty even between these two teams. You know what? Let's do it. I'm going to go with an 8 seed pulling off the 1 seed upset. I am going to go with TCU pulling off the 8-1. TCU has always been one of my favorite teams to watch this season. I think that Arizona is definitely catching fire after losing to Washington State. They've pulled off 3 straight wins. So I do like Arizona, but I like TCU more in this matchup. So let's go a little fun with this bracket. 5 seed Kentucky, 4 seed San Diego State. Now, San Diego State's defense would definitely be a tough matchup for Kentucky to handle. But I am going to go with the Wildcats of Kentucky moving on to the bracket. So we had 11 seed Gonzaga, 3 seed Duke. You kind of call this a blue blood matchup, but I'm going to go with Duke pulling this one out. So I got the Blue Devils moving on to the Sweet 16, where they will face off the winner of 7 seed Utah State and 2 seed Kansas, where I have the Jayhawks moving on to the Elite 8. So a crazy region that we're looking at with an 8-5, a 3, and a 2. So our first one is 8 seed TCU, 5 seed Kentucky. I am going to have TCU's run ending here with Kentucky pulling off. I can't believe I'm doing this again with picking Kentucky, but I definitely think that they're turning the corner. And then 3 seed Duke, 2 seed Kansas. I am going to go with the Duke Blue Devils moving on once again, where we have Kentucky and Duke. And I'm actually going to – I did this last year. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to go with Duke moving on to the Final Four. We have one more bracket portion of the bracket to fill out. Before we get to the Final Four, we have Houston and South Dakota State. I think that Houston really has no problem in this matchup, so give me the Cougars in their first round matchup. Another 8 and 9, we have Mississippi State and Nebraska. I'm actually going to go with Nebraska in this one, though I do like Mississippi State in this one. So I am going to go with Nebraska. Another Big Ten team here moves on, so I'm going to go with the Cornhuskers. Next, we have Clemson and Grand Canyon, another 5 and a 12. And I'm going to pull off another 5 and a 12 upset. It's definitely been a lot of upsets in this bracket. That's what March Madness is for. I am going to go with Grand Canyon moving on. 4 seed Illinois, 13 seed Akron. I am going to go with Illinois. Illinois just won a high-scoring affair against Minnesota last night, putting over 100 points in that one. So Illinois is starting to play some really good basketball when it's starting to matter most. So number 6, Florida. 11 seed Indiana State. Indiana State, definitely a story to watch, but I'm going to go with the Gators out of the SEC. And then next, we have Creighton facing off against Charleston. I am going to go with Creighton. Creighton's definitely one of those teams. Watch out for the Blue Jays. I think that they could definitely make a run to the Final Four So we have a 7 and a 10 with Colorado State, Wake Forest. Wake Forest probably playing their way out after losing to Notre Dame. We'll see. But I am going to go with Colorado State. Wake Forest, I mean, you definitely have some good wins, but I do like Colorado State. I just buying into the Mountain West. I think that Colorado State's one of those teams, that can at least win one game in March. And then we have Tennessee and Fairfield. No disrespect to Fairfield, but I think that with Dalton Connect, Tennessee's going to move on here. So let's move on with number 1 seed Houston and number 9 seed Nebraska. I am once again going to have the 1 seed advancing with Houston. Houston's one of those teams that's definitely been there. They definitely have the guard play, the experience to move far. 12 seed Grand Canyon, 4 seed Illinois. I am going to go with Illinois to move on. So no 12 seeds outside of McNeese moving to the Sweet 16. And then we have 6 seed Florida, 3 seed Creighton. I'm going to continue with the chalk here, go with Creighton. I'm going to continue that as well, picking Tennessee and Colorado State. So we have all top 4 seeds in this bracket as well. And then 1 seed Houston, 4 seed Illinois. I am going to go with Houston moving on. And then I'm going to have – this is a tough matchup between Creighton and Tennessee. I definitely think that this would definitely be another high-scoring matchup. But I definitely think that Dalton Connect – I mean, this man – can wake up and put up 40 points on you at any time. So I'm going to go with Tennessee. And then we have number 1 seed Houston, number 2 Tennessee. I think Tennessee it has definitely been one of those teams that's caught my eye early. So no disrespect to Houston, but I definitely think that Tennessee, they can get hot and make a deep run. So let's finish things out here in the Final Four. We have 2 seed Marquette, 3 seed Duke. I am going to go with Marquette advancing on to the national championship. I think that Duke's run ends. And then UConn and Tennessee, I'm going to go with UConn. So we have pretty much an all Big East national championship. And I hate to do this, but I'm going to go with UConn once again, pulling out and winning the national championship out there in Phoenix. So that's going to be it for this week's NCAA college basketball bracketology predictions. Keep with us. We'll be doing this every Thursday leading up to March Madness Selection Show, which will be on March 17th. And we're going to have our big bracket prediction show for the Sports Scramble. So definitely stay tuned here on the channel, and we will see you all next time. Have a good day.